Discover the best-kept secrets from the leading entrepreneurs across the globe. Learn from the greatest minds in business with the MyCoda podcast. Here's your host, Sam Payne.
What's up, everybody? Sam Payne here, and thank you so much for joining us for today's session of the MyCoda podcast. Now, I was extremely excited about getting today's guest on for you guys because he's a specialist in his field, guys. He has helped so many people start up and launch their own successful businesses. Richard has built 4 companies of his own, okay, and one of which he set up specifically to help others form and run their own businesses. He himself has been mentored and advised by some of the greatest minds in business, including world-class professors, leaders of globally recognized companies, and best-selling authors. So if anyone can help you in your startup, it's Richard Moore of the 8-Step-Startup. Now, this guy, I mean, we only scheduled 45 to 60 minutes for this, guys, but he's given so much value, and he was just so happy just to keep delivering and giving as much as he could to help you out. So please pin your ears back, get your notepads out, and tune in for this great session, okay? You're going to love this one, guys. I'm going to leave the intro here. Here is session 002 of the MyCoda podcast. Okay, hi Richard, how are you doing today?
I'm good, really good, thank you, mate, and really looking forward to having the interview with you.
Good. It's really pleased you agreed to do this because I'm excited to see what sort of advice you can give the guys listening today. So, just for the guys out there that may not be familiar with you, could you just please introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Richard Moore. I run a number of businesses, but in the online space, I'm mostly known for a course called 8-Step-Startup. But I have, for quite a few years now, I've mentored startup businesses, and essentially the course itself is designed to bring the fundamentals and the basic principles of starting a successful business to people using content not just from my experience but also from professors, best-selling authors, and of course business leaders and entrepreneurs who have really made it as well. My other businesses are face-to-face consulting in business, as well as 2 sports companies as well, so one in taekwondo and one that's yoga related. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Oh, perfect. And I mean, as you know, the theme of this podcast is all about business startups. So if you could just take us back to when you first started out, what change took place in you that made you pull the trigger and decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm really lucky actually, because for the past 15 years, I've been involved in sales and marketing with businesses. So my first ever job was with sales, but all along I was involved with business leaders whose interest was in growing a company and getting greater traction, in sales or in marketing or whatever penetration they're trying to get. And so I found that I was really lucky because I spend most of my time each day at work speaking either face-to-face or on the phone with managing directors who are building businesses. And what happened is I started realizing that I was quite good at understanding clearly what they actually were trying to achieve and giving them some real direct common sense. And often that was the way in which they said, look, can we get more of this? Can we buy your service? That then kind of moved forward. So about 6-7 years later, I then was involved with other companies in London, and ultimately I became a contractor because I actually decided that rather than just being bolted to one company, making a load of money for them and kind of only taking my small cut, I would probably do better contracting and helping a number of companies at once. And suddenly everything changed because I remember there was a managing director I was working with. These guys are in London in the top of the Gherkin at the moment, the big skyscraper. And they said, I remember him saying, you know what? In the last week that you've been with us, this was when I was contracting in the operations side of things, he said, you've saved us over £50,000. And I basically changed his software for his company. I changed some of his sales processes. And I just basically trimmed a lot of fat. And he said, that's worth so much money to me. And I was sitting there thinking, this is my first contracting job. I'm like, I'm making a few £100 a day off this. So suddenly it made me think, well, actually I could really give value here. And that's what gave me some kind of sense that I was probably onto something. So increasingly I started helping more and more businesses, and I've just found it was great to have learnt from more established companies, but actually the real thrill was with companies at the really embryonic stage, when they're just like got this kind of nebulous idea and they want to make it hit the ground running. And coming from a sales background, it meant I always knew that there was the kind of that criticality of nailing down some cash flow for the company and commercializing it is so crucial, otherwise everything falls apart. And being able to help someone, because I've simply done a lot of this myself and I'd started my own businesses a couple of years later as well, it's all come to the kind of get to this point where it just validates what I've been doing. But that was the moment when I started contracting, probably 6-7 years ago, it would have been, that I started thinking, do you know what, I just seem to be able to help people out, and I seem to be able to go through all the crap and just get them the kind of result or answer they're after. And that's what got me, I was really lucky, got me into board meetings and things like that. And they would all often turn and say, what's your take on this? And, you know, I'd be unpopular, but I'd give them the truth, and suddenly changes would happen. And I just loved that thrill of making a difference, really. So that's what really made the difference. But then it spun on a couple of years later. I then launched my first company, which was a taekwondo school. I'd been teaching it anyway for years, and that went well. Then that spun into another company, but I'd always done the consulting. And of course, then 8-Step-Startup came, and about 18 months ago, the idea kind of came together. So hopefully that answers your question. There's a little things going on, but there was kind of a natural progression, always centered around helping other people.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, because I speak to guys all the time, and they seem to fight this natural urge that it's a feeling. I mean, I can only describe it as it just felt right to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and when I speak to guys who are talking to me about their startups, a lot of the problem is convincing themselves that actually this is the time to do it. It feels good. I mean, have you experienced similar things with the guys in your program?
Yes, I have, a lot. And in fact, what happens is that I would say more than 50% of the people who I mentor and have mentored over the years absolutely are looking for that right time to come and tap them on the shoulder. But arguably, there's never really a perfect time, because there's an element of risk, of course, involved as well. The best thing to do, especially in 2016, is just go get it and go try it out. And if you got the right product, if you have conviction, not just in the product but also in yourself, so you back yourself, right, then really there should be nothing to stop you. Because you'll fall on your knees every so often, there'll be hurdles and things, but actually there should be nothing stopping you getting what you want. And it's interesting, Sam, because you get to a point where you look back and you think, how crazy was it that I would get up at 5 a.m, I'd commute to London. Seriously, I'd be booking hotels to stay overnight because I had so much to do. So 60, 70-hour weeks. And you take I was quite well paid, but you take several grand home a month and that's it. And you just think, there's got to be a better way. If only the lifestyle at least is better. But usually, as I say, people are looking for that moment or something to flick the switch, but often they've just got to dive in. And what you tend to find is once they start, there's then the realization, do you know what, I can do it. But it was all of this rewiring that needed to happen, because they've spent their life, up to that point, basically saying to themselves, no, it's got to be this traditional conservative route. And I'm sure you've heard that kind of thing before.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting you touched on the point of you was in a well-paid job in the city, but
yeah,
because I can relate to that, because my business partner Mario, he at the time when we were starting out, he was working in the city, and I set up my own gym. Yeah. And for me, cash flow was a problem because it's all tied up in my company, but I had a great lifestyle. I had the time to work on other things. For him, it was like yourself. He was in the city and had tons of cash flow, but no time to do it. Yeah. So we was both, it was like chalk and cheese in that respect. So I can definitely relate to that as well.
What really changed things was I remember so well because it was a Wednesday night. It was several years back, and this was just before I stopped completely working in London. And I got home and it was like 9 o'clock, right? And which isn't super late, but it is when you got in the office at like 6. And my wife was showing me photos of my own child on her phone. That child that was sleeping in the house. And I'm just like, I have to reintroduce myself to this person every weekend, and I literally don't see them throughout the week because I leave early and come home late. And it's like, well, what's the point? Yeah. And I remember thinking, because I was on a wonderful package, and I was in this director position, and there was a lot of wonderful promises, and moving up and up and up is all good. But I remember thinking, do you know what? You could actually triple the money, but it's not worth it, because I really think I could go a different way. And what's really funny, and your business partner would probably realise this, I suppose, if he works himself as well, is that you get to a point that when you've got clients then that turn around and say to you, you know, what would it have to look like for you to be here full time? I had this like in December, and it's hilarious because they're like, what about this? No, what about this? Well, that if we gave you this and this and this, and you're just like, it's just not worth it because I can do that myself, and I don't have to spend, 6 G's a year on a train that's going to. Do you know what I mean? And I don't have to miss out on so much stuff. And one of my first mentors, who's a wonderful guy, who's just turned 70 actually last year, self-made millionaire, Porsche and yacht and everything. So he's really living the life. He said to me, Richard, the thing I will tell you, because this was just about when I was just about to start my first business, he said, when you go and work for yourself, you'll never want to work for anyone else again. So he said, be careful, because you never want to go back. And he's so right, because you don't have to deal with other people's issues. It's all on your terms, and there's no better way. So if anyone hears this who is thinking, shall I or shan't I, the thing is, in the Western world at the very least, in 2016, if you make mistakes, there are so many safety nets. You'll be fine, because if you lose everything, you'll be fine. You know what I mean? You're not going to be destitute. You're not going to lose everything, because there are systems in place. Certainly here in the UK, you and I both know, if we were homeless and hungry, well, there are places you can go and they feed you, and that's how easy this is to be a kind of a basic level human being. So you really might as well go for it, because I'm fearful of that. Of that regret when I'm 80, and so I'm making the most of what the time I have right now.
No, that's a great point. And I mean, myself, I started off. I had a really poor printing job, a printing apprenticeship, and it was diabolical. But so then I joined the military. So going from being under where every decision had to go up the chain and then come back down again. Yeah. For me, that was the best thing about running my own companies. Is I didn't have that at all, so I can completely agree with you on that one. So when you first started, when you first made that change from sort of that corporate environment to going into your own, setting up your own business, what was the biggest challenge you faced?
It was difficult because I'd gone from such a structured world. I mean, I was running teams of people who were being taught the rigidity of a daily plan. And it was like there was a set meeting each day at certain times. You had to do all these certain things. And technically speaking, I could have sat in my pajamas all week doing very little. So one of the hardest things to start with was self-discipline. And also, I'd made sure, because I was taking a bit of a risk. I have a wife that doesn't work, and I've got children as well. I've got a mortgage and cars and stuff like that, and all this kind of thing. It's like, well, you can't just do nothing, because you need to cover this. But I also, at the same time, I had plenty of savings and things. So I was concerned that I was going to end up, a little bit relaxed about things. So the hardest thing was getting the self-discipline. But it really didn't take long, because I just think it's in my DNA to never sit still on one thing, even if it's going well, is to then look at, what's the next angle, what's the next project? And I think it felt like moments. I mean, so many people say in hindsight, family members say in hindsight, why didn't you just take a month off, before you started your business? And I just thought, I just got itchy, I just wanted to get started. So the hard thing was being organized, because I was used to structure. But once I kind of got that monkey off my back, I realized, and it really didn't take long, it was about a week or so, I was like, you know what, you set the agenda now. And it was interesting because so many things kind of flowed back in, and I started asking myself things like, right, well, what's needed right now? You need a sale right now. Where's today's customer coming from? So the corporate world stayed with me to an extent, and that helped me. But I just re-engineered it to suit what I was after. I suppose, if I'm brutally honest, Sam, why not be? There was a little bit of a moment with the first business, with the Taekwondo school, when I said to myself, I know I've taught plenty of students, and I know I've worked with other people, and I know I've closed sales over the past however many years as well, but what about getting that first customer for my first business? Is that going to happen? There's this ludicrous feeling of possible self-doubt. Is it going to work? And the moment I got the first one, I was like, well, of course it will. And then I was off, But there was that kind of, but what about me? What about my company? Is it just going to not work? And, you just kind of offset that emotion with a bit of logic. It's like, seriously, I think I'll be all right. So you just, as I said earlier, you've got to have conviction. You've got to back yourself, and that really will carry you for those early scary days.
Yeah, it's great. And so, if you had to rewind the clock and speak to yourself back then, knowing what you know now with your experience, what would the one crucial piece of advice you would have given yourself?
Only one. That's not fair.
Okay, let's name three.
No, okay, three. Okay, I would say. Well, I get asked all the time, if you were to go back, what was the one thing you'd say, or what's the most important tip? And it's always the same. Okay, always is you have to be consistent with everything. If you're consistent, you show up day in, day out, you will always win, because basically you're just not giving up. It's that simple tenacity thing. It was drilled into me about 10 years ago when I was with a new manager on a sales team. And this guy he had a lot of flaws, arguably, as a manager, but one thing he did well was motivate me and knew how to press my buttons. And he said, I remember, because our target went up one quarter, and he said, some teams will do more than us. Some teams will do epic amounts one week, but we're going to always be there. Just our consistent amount of money every week. We have a good week, great. The next week we still do our basic stuff. And being consistent with everything, and I'm talking then about things like if you have to do social media posts, don't have a day off, you just still do it. I mean, if you're at a wedding, you still do it, because you need to make sure you're there for your business just like you would be for a family member. So consistency beats everything, because too many people complain about not being able to get things done or having results or having the time, but actually it's probably down to not being too consistent. The second thing I would say is to ignore most of the people who want to give you advice, because a lot of the advice will be emotionally charged, and often it will come in the early stages from family members and friends who genuinely do have your best interest in heart, but it's through the lens of maybe a more traditional conservative approach. Often if you're doing something a little off the wall, or even nowadays doing something only online, a lot of people aren't quite down with that being effective, which is ridiculous. But people will tend to give you advice, and I remember someone very close to me recently saying, do you think you should perhaps ease up a little bit? Because it was one of my companies. I think I'd launched the company. It was like 6 weeks in to a pre-launch, and I was like, right, I'm going to start hiring the sales team now. And they're like, well, why don't you just kind of hold off a bit and just kind of see how it goes? And I'm like, there's the difference right there. So just ignore that kind of thing. Go hard, because the top successful people that I'm very lucky to speak to, none of them ever say that kind of thing. You just got to go for it. And the third thing, actually, it just popped in my head, actually, the third piece of advice I give is that you can always work harder than you think. Okay, a lot of people say I'm out of time and that. I don't buy it most of the time, because look at it this way, right? I've got 4 businesses, but I also have a family, And what I love is that there are so many younger people who are, like 20 years old, whatever, and they're out there. One of my mentees has built his own Forex business. He's absolutely smashing it, making great money each month. He's got loads of clients, things like that. And you think you can run through walls when you're 20 years old. You've got all the energy in the world. You've got no responsibility in the main. And so no one should ever complain about having little time or energy, because if I, as someone who's 35 with a family, very young children who constantly are needing me or distracting me and things like that, if I can make it all work and not be, completely pranging out with stress every day, then people can probably do it as well. But what it comes down to is when you've put the kids to bed, when you've spent the evening with, a couple of hours with your wife, you don't go to bed, you're up till 2 some days. And, it's because if you want everything, well, you've got to do everything as well. And that's that. So I think I would go back and I would say to myself, work harder. And that's a strong piece of advice, because if you think you're working your hardest, you could probably do more. There's always another gear.
Yeah, that's great advice. That really is. That's great advice. I mean, I think we even agreed the terms of this podcast near close to midnight most nights over email, if I remember right.
Exactly right. And the funny thing is, you write the email, and I responded to the email knowing full well that the other person would probably be picking it up straight away. Because
exactly.
That's kind of that. Well, that's the world that you're in, and actually, it's funny that people say, "Well, how does this work, Richard?" Because you're talking about working 70-hour weeks in the city, and now you're probably working more hours. But it's not work. It's just being having it as part of your life, I suppose. And so, if you're doing the right thing, actually working hard is simply a case of having contact time. It doesn't mean that you're more stressed or worried or not enjoying it.
No, that's awesome advice. That really is, because that's one of the key things where people say to me, "Well, I don't have much time in my week," and I actually ask to see their week, and then I can generally pick 6-7 hours a day for them and say, "Okay, you utilise this time now."
Absolutely right, absolutely. And the thing is, but it just to say, it's the same as people who say they don't have any money, right? And then they always are spending it on, the classic thing is spending on coffee. I think it was David Back who wrote The Automatic Millionaire, calling it the latte factor.
Yeah.
And if it's not money, it's time. It's like, yeah, I've got no time, but I have to watch the football, or I have no time, but I have to watch Game of Thrones. No, you don't. I've missed plenty of football matches and don't watch Game of Thrones. And the reality is, my life is just as good. And that's just some things some people feel are compulsory, but actually, if push came to shove, they'd be happily do without it.
Yeah, I think it depends on people's circumstances as well. I mean, if your back's truly against the wall, you're going to react.
Yeah.
So do you find that people's circumstances make a huge difference in their effort levels and their input?
Yeah, I think so. But also, I think you're right, because some people... one of my first mentees was an inspiration. He lived with his mum. They lived in like a basement in Peru. I'm not making this up, right? This is in South America. And the guy, I think he was a student. He and his mum both worked at like some local office as cleaners on a night shift together, and he was doing my course and he was building a business to bring working out, so like different exercises and things to impoverished people outside who couldn't afford gym memberships or gym equipment, and somewhere in there he was actually getting sleep in as well. And the guy's hustle was phenomenal. It was like 19. Seriously, he'll end up as president or something. Probably. But, that guy just knew that if he didn't completely smash it, that it was like there's no rent, there's no food. And think about that. Think about coming home from school or from college or whatever, then going out with your mum to a cleaning job and getting back in the crack of dawn, but because you have to, otherwise there's nowhere to be. And the thing is, to be able to see above all of that and say, there's something better for me, I'm going to go and get this as well, that was amazing, absolutely amazing. And some people just don't know how good they've got it. But the thing to remember, and this is, if anyone's familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, he made a really interesting point recently. He said, if you want to earn millions and millions of pounds a year, then you need to go and work for it, right? But if you're okay with earning less money, and you want to play video games 6 hours a day, and you get to do that. So let's say someone's cool with earning 40 grand a year and playing video games. If that's what they want to do, then in his words, he said, well, then actually you've won. You've actually won. And so, you don't have to go and make 600 G's a year because that's what everyone else says you should in that kind of entrepreneurial space. It may just be that what makes you most happy is being online and playing Halo. So if that's actually what you want to do, then that means you've won. But obviously the caveat is don't complain if you want more and you're not willing to put down video games or something like that. So it's interesting that there are different perspectives, and some people genuinely want to break out of being an employee, but they are really, to the core, they are cool with not being a multi-millionaire. That's just not their vibe. They just want to have a lifestyle that's different. You know what I mean? Work from that.
Yeah. I actually saw that interview as well, and it was a great interview, to be fair. Although it's only 3 minutes of it. I mean, I'd like to see the rest of it.
Really good point.
Okay, so, I mean, you talk a lot about how influential the guys were you were interviewing. So you had the business professors, the best-selling authors, the leading corporate leaders. So I want to talk to you about the importance of mentors and how important do you feel it is for entrepreneurs to invest in them, and at what stage should they look at doing this?
That's actually a really good question, because on its own, just saying are they important enough is one thing, but when you should invest in getting a mentor is really important too. Without question, not having a mentor or more than one mentor is an absurd approach to trying to become successful, especially if it's in a world where you don't know every last thing about it, right? So it's absurd because there's help out there. And there's an analogy I gave to someone recently about this. I said, imagine you don't know how to drive a car, like literally no idea. But we're all intelligent people. If I was to sit in a car, be given the keys and no information whatsoever, having never seen a car, I could probably eventually work it out. I could have a go on the steering wheel. Okay, I get this moves the wheels. I'd eventually work out where the key goes. I wouldn't have a clue about the gears, the pedals. What my point is that you actually press every button and you try every single thing. It's a very inefficient way of learning to drive. Then, of course, if you have a driving instructor, they explain exactly what to do. But the analogy isn't full until you realize that, given the context of working and building a business, that car is on a starting grid. Because you have competitors as well. You have other people out there who are also trying to, drive and maybe win the race. So you better get learning to drive fast. So, you may have a great idea, but I've put together some content a while back on this idea of working as though someone else is out there trying to compete with you. So even if that isn't the case, you should work as if someone else is grinding harder who wants to actually beat you to it and has exactly the same idea as you and exactly the same amount of ambition. So you've got to outperform them. To not get mentors is crazy because everyone, there are many out there who can help you with different things. And to answer your question directly, there are 2 points here. Firstly, you shouldn't sit on one mentor just because you buy into them. You need to understand that there are many mentors you should be looking for to help with many different things, right? So I went to, you mentioned, I know you've done an interview with Matt Pocious. I went to Matt Pocious last year and I had him help me with my social media element of what I was doing. So I had a strong grasp of it, but he actually was really helpful as a mentor in that particular area, okay? I have masses of respect for him. However, I've got another mentor who's 60 and who's helped entrepreneurs and startup businesses for over 40 years. That's kind of been his space, really. He's worked with the Prince's Trust and things like that. And, 40 years ago, Matt Pocious wasn't even a glint in his parents' eye, So everyone has to be seen as someone who can bring in something in particular, and so you need to go to different people for different things. That 60-year-old mentor, I would never have gone to him for social media mentorship because he wouldn't have a clue what he's doing. Do you see what I mean? So multiple mentors are crucial, but the other thing as well is that you need to make sure that you are giving them some value in return, because not always are our mentors really going to want to give you loads of attention and time of day. So you need to make sure you're not being stupid, do your research, be intelligent, and show that you're someone who's going to take on their advice and actually run with it and do something. But to answer the other point of your question, you need to get them right away. I had 3 people I engaged with, 3 millionaire mentors who are all, very, very successful and had been for many, many years. And I had them at the very, very, very start, when I had this seed of an idea, and I fired it out to each of them. One I'd worked with, and the other 2 I knew as family friends, and I'm very fortunate to have them as close friends. And these people, I said, here's my battle plan, here's what I'm going to do, what do you genuinely think? And these 3 guys were giving me great feedback. And the reason why it's important to have a mentor at the very start, Sam, is because it might be that they save you a massive fall and a load of investment before you've even started, which is fantastic. And in fact, one of them suggested something which was so pivotal that it meant that it probably saved me a huge amount of time, and it also made me much bigger than I would otherwise have possibly ever been. So I'm very grateful for that. So early and many of them is the answer.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. In fact, when I interviewed Matt, I asked a question which relates to part of the answer you gave, which I said, what would be the most crucial piece of advice you'd give someone starting out? And he said, if you want to be number 1, work like you're number 2. Yeah. So that goes back to that point you said in the middle as well. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate. I mean, when I first started out, I didn't realise the importance of mentors, and I made stupid mistakes, tons of them. And it's only when I started investing, and actually I was on Matt's program as well. So yeah, I can agree. It's only when I got those mentors that I really started making some progress. So yeah, 100% agree. So if someone was looking for a mentor now, how would you advise that they look for the right mentor? And secondly, how to approach them and ask them to ultimately mentor them?
That's a really good question as well. I think you need to understand that, because I answered this question to someone recently. Actually, he was concerned that his mentors weren't giving him loads of feedback. What you want to understand is that the best mentors aren't always the best teachers. They might be the best mentors because you can learn through osmosis, just by being near them and by observing them and seeing what they do, because they're world class in their space, and their profession is being great at that thing, not necessarily mentoring you. And for people like that, and I'm speaking from experience here because I've been fortunate enough to speak to a lot of business leaders and professors and such like. The key is to sound different from all the awestruck people who are constantly reaching out to them. And it's no different to reaching out to a celebrity, right? So if you're the same old response with a celebrity where you're going, oh, wow, you're amazing, I think you're awesome, could have your autograph. Do you know what? That actually is gets a bit boring for these people, because that's all we ever hear. But if you go to them with something of interest or of value, in fact, to help them out, then that can be really effective, because then you'll look different, and actually you're giving them back value, basically. But here's the practical advice. What I did was I researched these people to the nth degree, and this is how I did well in sales anyway. I made literally millions of pounds of business sales for businesses I work with in London, and closing sales was all about buying into people and understanding people. So yeah, I researched the company, but I managed to get a real relationship with people because I looked into the person as well. So for example, I was recently in touch with Jeffrey Garrett. So he's the dean. I see he oversees the whole of Wharton University in the States. This is the university Elon Musk went to. This is where Warren Buffett originally went to. I appreciate they dropped out as well, but this is where these guys went to. You got CEOs there from Boeing and GE and so on as well. So to get to the dean, you can't just contact them by the phone or by email and say, hey, could you give me some advice, or could you help me out? I'm building my 8-Step Startup course, because they're busy people. They just won't have the time. What you do is you research them. So I spent time reading up on Jeffrey Garrett. I was reading papers he wrote and he presented in lectures from like 2008. And I remember read one of his articles from last year on big data. The problem is people want results, but they're not willing to go, dive down into the depths. And when, I remember that I did the same with there's a professor at Harvard Law called Cass Sunstein, used to work for the White House as well, wrote an amazing book called Nudge with Richard Thaler. And you don't just get these guys on the phone unless you've read their stuff. And I tell you what, it's one of the hardest things ever was reading this guy's paper on like economics from Harvard or whatever. And it was just like, I can't get my head around it. But eventually I did. And it meant that when I contacted him, then I could ask him questions that were going to be of interest to him. So I wasn't giving him value in the sense of offering him something that he could buy. I was giving him emotional value in the sense that he was saying, oh, wow, okay, subconsciously he was having a conversation with himself going, I'm being stimulated here. This person's showing an interest in what it is I actually do. Okay, so because of that, and he's asked a really interesting question, I'm going to respond to him. And then you're away. And it's no different with mentors. Okay, Grant Cardone, I don't know if you're familiar with Grant Cardone.
Yeah, I love his books. The guy's amazing.
Great guy. So one of his top boys is Rob Sislow. So Rob works for Grant. He does all of his content and his production. So the way Grant Cardone looks and his videos and all of the posts and things, that's all Rob Sislow. So again, I did the research. I got in touch with Rob Sislow a couple of months ago, and we're talking about how I'll be probably positioned to produce something with him later on in the year. And, that allowed me in turn to then get in touch with Grant Cardone, because a lot of people, rightly like you say, he writes great books, but a lot of people leave it at that. But to get in touch with someone on Snapchat and say, hey, Grant, just to let you know, I've been in touch with Rob Sislow. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you guys later in the year. Then get a reply from Grant Cardone live. You just think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Again, it's about giving some real value in an emotional sense. So, again, being practical, if you want to get a great mentor, you can go to the top, but you need to learn about them. Don't be so awestruck. Give them something interesting to talk to you about, and then ease your way in from there. Asking outright, will you be my mentor? It won't work. And the reason why is you haven't earned the right to ask them to be your mentor. Someone will do you a favor and want to help you if you give them value. That's why you can't walk up to someone on the street and say, give me £5, because they won't do it. You've not earned the right. But you can ask your girlfriend and they'll say, yeah, sure, no problem. No questions asked, because you've earned the right through emotional depositing and so on. So the same goes with mentors. Give them value. Don't be so awestruck. Just be normal. Seriously. Yeah. Read up about their stuff and ask them something interesting. You'll tend to find that they're quite interested back, and then you can build that relationship from there. That's what I've done, and it's really been effective. But you've got to understand why you want that particular mentor. Okay, not because of hype, not because other people have them as a mentor. It should be because right now I need help with X. Okay, at the time last year, about a year ago, when I needed a little bit more help with a particular part of my social media space, Matt Pocious was perfectly positioned. So I got in touch with him right then, and it went from there. And it's exactly the same. Identify the right person, do the research, and then you should be absolutely fine.
Perfect. Great answer. And like I say, I suppose doing that research, you might even identify that actually this probably isn't the guy that I want to mentor me.
Precisely.
So,
yeah.
Brilliant. So you've had you run 3 successful businesses before you started the 8-Step Startup. So what made you decide to sort of flip the script and go down this whole route of mentoring people with the 8-Step Startup?
That's a good question too. I've always wanted to do more online because I could see it coming a long time ago. And the impetus really behind 8-Step Startup was originally that I thought the sports businesses, so the taekwondo business I was running, it was going so well. Like everything I touched turned to gold. I thought, why don't I package this? Because, the sales background had just got me thinking, how do I make more money and create a new package or a new product? How do I package this and I sell that as like a course? It was originally going to be a course for martial arts school owners, but then I realized that was, potentially a little bit too niche. So I wanted to do something a little bit broader. And I thought, well, actually, I consult with businesses and I've helped them more or less as long as I've been doing Taekwondo. Why don't I make this more about building businesses? Because I do that and I've got a track record with helping people out. But then it went further because I started looking online at what other people were doing. And then I realized that the major thing that was getting to me and really irritating me was that there were so many people who purported to have success online, because you can be whoever you want to be, of course, but actually had nothing in terms of substance underneath. And it was really annoying me because you'd see people are going, basically they would, I saw one guy clearly just gone on holiday, shot a video, he's in the Maldives or something, shot a video out at sea, like, this is my lifestyle, I spend my life on this. Or, the classic hire a fancy car and, pretend you own it kind of thing.
Put some cash on the front seat.
Exactly. And, you see it on Instagram all the time and go to the bank, draw out all the money you can in 50 pound notes. Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about this in his video recently. If you follow him, you'll see it. It's like anyone can do that, but none of you are going to make any money because it's all the money you've got and you're just holding up. It doesn't work like that. And so what I wanted was essentially association bias. Okay, but going deeper than that, I thought in a reaction to the sea of people who think they know what they're talking about, but simply don't have any experience, I've got something to add. Because me on my own, I'm 15 years experience closing loads of money and helping people. And that's just showing off. That's just time spent doing something. That's experience. 15 years doing anything is enough time to be half decent at it. But then I thought, do you know what? If you're online with a global audience, well, then everyone's trying to compete, and there's going to be plenty of people who have more experience than you. So how do you take it further? And I've got mentees who've got double the experience I've got, but the way you go further is then adding more people. And I remember sitting back thinking, how can I create a scenario where someone could never say that there's no value? Then what you do is you have to cover from all bases. So I thought, if people like me, then they'll buy it. If people relate to the books they read, so best-selling authors, then I need to have content from them. If they relate to the university angle, if Tai Lopez, the hooks a lot of people is that he reads lots. So there's the intellectual angle, at least to start with a year ago. And so the good life can come from that. So let's look at professors. Rather than just the ones I knew from university, I thought let's go for the top ones. And then, of course, because it's business, well, what about the best entrepreneurs and people from really well-known companies? Because if someone's a director at Microsoft or at Facebook, no one can argue with what they really have to say, especially if I carefully select these people that haven't been corporate all their life but have been startup entrepreneurs beforehand. So I thought if I can cover all bases and get content from them all, then no one could ever argue that there isn't value in what I'm doing. And so that's kind of what brought it together. It was almost an irritation, Sam. There's people out there who seem to think that, well, they simply say, I know the secret. There's no secret. You just do it. They know the secret or something like that. And the reality is that the best people out there who are doing it and are right at the top, they don't talk like that. And actually, then if there's depth and substance, that's going to attract people, and it means there's a greater foundation. So that's really what made 8-Step come to fruition. And then I got to really enjoy every week connecting with amazing people. And, it's a real thrill when they get back to you and say, hi, what a great idea. Here's some advice, and then you're away.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing advice. And because I'm speaking to people in events and stuff like that, and what is becoming apparent is people love the idea of entrepreneurship, but they tend to go off the back of their own advice and the advice of their friends. Yeah, because they'll say, "Oh, my friend said I've got a great idea," and then they'll invest a ton of time and money in it, and actually they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So the fact that you've gone out and interviewed these key influencers and actually got some real facts and some real influential people behind you, I think people can take a lot away from that. I think that's great advice.
But the thing about this is that what people think is that you're going to come up with these nuggets of information that no one would ever know. But it doesn't work like that, because the advice you get from, a professor who teaches executive MBAs to directors of Fortune 500 companies isn't always something you never would have got out of a textbook. Often it's something really obvious. But what they're doing is, because of the position they're in, what they're doing is they're validating that it's basically right. I mean, I remember one of I think it was his amazing name, Richard Jolly, and he's a professor of organizational behavior or something. He teaches at an MBA at London Business School. And he said, I think it was him, he said, Richard, my biggest advice, cash is king. I was like, well, I know that. That's all. Is that what I get? And I was like, I needed to then I went back and got more. But I was just like, that's the most obvious thing you could say. But what the point, I was missing the point originally. What it is that it actually validates what you know to be true. Yeah. Because if a professor who teaches the people from the most recognized companies in the world says cash is king, what it means is, do you know what? You should actually, rather than say, I suppose I know that already, you need to think, well, actually, maybe that is the most important thing. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I think that's the killer. The killer thing anyone could say that cripples them is, oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I can't stand that. I cannot stand that. So
if they know it, they should be doing it.
Exactly. So let's. You mentioned you touched on books and stuff when we went through our answer, and I just want to talk to you about that because, like you said, I mean, I love reading, and I know you're very keen on reading. So how important do you feel it is to read on a regular basis when running your own company, and how does reading benefit you?
I think it's essential. Gary Vaynerchuk, we've talked a lot about in this interview, and he famously doesn't read anything. He's all instinct, and he's one of those kind of rare breeds. I think it's essential because it's another way you can learn from people. And whilst I've been very lucky to reach top people, there are some that maybe I won't reach just because I won't, or because maybe they've passed on. And to be able to read their thoughts directly can really, really help. And that's why I like audiobooks, not least because they're efficient, but also because you often have, as the narrator, the actual author as well. And so you get so much more of the vibe from them. But I feel that all startup business owners should read, because also what it does is it encourages you to imagine the scenario they're talking about. And this is this Richard Dawkins simulate the future kind of thing that Ty Lopez talks about. And the idea is that you're picturing the things that they're discussing, so maybe it's a mistake you otherwise don't want to make, and it encourages lateral thinking and encourages you to open your mind up a bit, and it essentially warms up your brain a bit. So that's why early on in the day I always read, because it gets me moving a bit in my mind. It starts me thinking about stuff. And I really strongly believe, although I haven't done any research on this, I just really believe from my own experience, that the more you read, the more you open up parts to your brain, the more kind of connections get firing, and the more you can just think about things in a more well-rounded way. But here's the big thing that really gripes me about people who read all the time. The thing is that there are so many amazing books out there, but you've got 168 hours in the week, and you can't overlearn because then you never take any action. So many people, just like we discussed with mentors, they read any book rather than books that are highly relevant to what they're doing. And I get it. There's value in being broad in what you read, because it's essential to kind of learn around the subject as it's known. But you can go too far, especially when you're starting up a business. If you're starting up a business specifically on investing, well, you should be reading books on investing, right?
Yeah.
If you're not, then why the hell are you reading The Intelligent Investor? Because the reality is, a lot of people I've got it on my bookshelf, by the way, up here. I have read it, but I have invested in companies.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be worthwhile. But the point is that a lot of people flash it about because they think it's fashionable, because it was written by Ben Graham, sure. But do you need that information right now? I mean, you could argue you need all this different information. Far better, I think, if you're an average person who possibly might dabble in investing, rather than becoming a career investor, then you shouldn't read that book. I know it's controversial, but you shouldn't. The reason is, yes, he's the top guy, But if you actually read it, it's so complex and deep, you won't understand it. Far better to read John Kay's book, The Long and the Short of It, because it's designed for a normal, everyday person who wants to try out investing.
Yeah.
Way more effective. And so what you find is that if you actually start realizing that the time you have during the day that you're going to read, if that's selective reading, specifically on areas that are going to help you, well, you grow so much faster. And if you love reading that much, well, then you can create space by being more effective early on because you read the right stuff. You create space to then read other things if you really must. But it's stunning that you got people who are just starting out with very little time, often complaining about a lack of time, that have the audacity to read a book about something not directly related to business. Do you see? It's like saying, I could learn something from watching this TV program. Yeah, you probably could, but why aren't you working on your startup unless you're where you want to be? So it's the same principle.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a rant, I know, but it's really important. A lot of people don't think about that. If you're going to read around a subject, well, make sure it's still loosely connected at least to what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, not meaning to pitch what I've done, but that's why I set up this book group on Facebook, because I was finding people were asking me what books I've read, and when I'm saying, well, what do you want out of a book?
Yeah.
That was my answer. They're like, I don't really know. So I thought it'd be cool to, just get a community together.
No, it's a really good idea.
Realise that.
Yeah.
And okay, so if you had to recommend 5 books for someone who they didn't really know what business they wanted to get into. They know they wanted to set up their own company. Would you recommend up to sort of 5 books that would infuse them, give them start getting their brain working, start getting them thinking about, okay, this could work, that could work, something that's a bit general but aims them in a direction?
Yeah. There were so many, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because when I get asked for book recommendations, people don't give any context. It's like, well, for what? What do you want to learn about? So it's quite difficult. But there are some general ones, and I know there's going to be some cliches in this, but I'm going to give a reason for each one rather than just reeling them off. And hopefully that goes to show that I've actually read the books as well. You know what I mean? So first off, if you're building your own business, then I strongly believe you should read The Everything Store, Brad Stone's essentially the biography of Jeff Bezos, who is an absolute beast. Yeah. And what it does is especially the crucial bits, the early part, when he's building the business, the perspective is of the book shows you that Jeff Bezos always knew it would be bigger than it currently was. He just had to go through the motions to get there. So there's this wonderful moment when he's like, right, the business is hit like $1 million in sales or something, and one of his associates comes over and says, we should have a massive party. And he turns around to him and says, look, there's going to be loads of milestones like this. That's not the way I want to run things. Let's just get back on it. And there's the one thing that jumped out of that book for me was the line or the idea that you have to get big quick. And it talks about scaling on a level that just is so inspirational that if you're just starting out, it makes you put down that book and think, right, I'm going to go hard at this. I'm going to really build something massive. So it's utterly essential that you read that. I think there's so much more depth to it, in fact. Yeah. About innovation and working around problems and challenging the norms. Another book in the similar kind of vein, of course, is worth mentioning is the Elon Musk biography by Ashley Vance. Elon Musk is everyone's favourite person, and whilst many facets of his life aren't particularly spot on, I think he's very much the inspirational guy, more so than even Branson, even for us in the UK, in entrepreneurial space. And the reason why that book is so good is that Ashley Vance, of course, was tight with Elon Musk and really has that kind of inner. It feels like you're actually a fly on the wall there. And the number one takeaway from that is it shows you what a human being is genuinely capable of, right? Yes, we have 168-hour weeks, but on occasion he would work 100 hours. And he would look at a situation or a problem or a challenge, and he'd in his head he'd say, this is how much time it probably should take. What about if I knock like a fifth of that time off? Can we just go do that? So you put down that book and you start thinking to yourself, as one human being, the amount to which I can achieve is astronomical. I really need to bear that in mind, and it gives you a crucial perspective that it should require you to jump into that book probably at least monthly after having read it, to continue just to kind of suckle on that kind of motivational vibe. You can generate so much productivity if you really want it, and I think that's that's the big message there. Another book, I won't labour on it too much, but Jonah Berger's Contagious, for a startup person, especially online. The idea of building themselves up, building a personal brand. I think Contagious is important. The idea behind it is he's essentially breaking down the, 6 steps, as he calls them, to being kind of as close to being viral as possible and being contagious as in terms of stories, content, or whatever it is. So it's very current, that book, and I think that for a new starter, because I've recommended it to many of my mentees who've never read it, it can be quite an eye-opener, and it at least grounds you with the basics of how to make sure you're coming across in the right way. So Contagious is a good one to add. My all-time favourite book I can't ignore, and definitely it should be in here. I've loved Seneca's On the Shortness of Life for probably 5-6 years now. And I would say at least once a month, more likely once a week, actually, I will dip in. And there's a chapter in very early on, and it's like 10 pages worth, and I'll often read that again and again. If you haven't read it, it's my absolute all-time number one book, because it really puts into perspective how much time you genuinely have, and the greatest way of summing it up is where he says that people just pass time. They don't live life. And whenever you catch yourself just passing time, if you've got half an hour until a particular thing is coming up, just passing time it's actually, I used the word earlier, to have the audacity to do it when you've been gifted the amount of time you've got, which is finite, is crazy. And he compares time and money. I don't know if you read it, Sam. I guess you put it out, but it compares time and money in a really essential way. Basically, what it says is people are so tight with their money, they don't want to give it away, but they throw their time away like they're immortal, and it should be completely reverse. You can find money, and it's true, you can make money, no problem, but when you're done, you're done. That's it. You're out of time. 90 minutes, end of the match, the whistle blows. You can't score any more goals, right? So it's the same kind of principle. That book really made the difference, and I'm so pleased I bought it like 6 years ago. I wish I'd owned it even further back, because it would have changed me when I was much younger. I think you said 5. I think that's 4. So the last one, I was thinking about this actually. The last one, what was it? I think the what they don't. This one, Mark McCormick. That's it. What they don't teach you in Harvard Business School is a massive book to read, because the guy who built IMG, the sports agency, what he does is he takes real life. This is kind of what I've been trying to do in 8-Step-Startup, is take real life situations and give them context and say, you know what, you can learn loads of stuff from people, but actually here's what real life's really like for a businessman. And there's so much candor in it, and it's so direct, and it's like, people react this way, be like this. It's just great lessons for being a businessman, and I really rate that book. So I often use that when I teach in London and I coach sales teams. I often pull a lot of stuff out of that as well. So they're my 5.
That's good. And the on the strategy of life, the one thing I've done after reading that, I just instantly outsourced everything that I didn't need to be doing on the whole money versus time subject. That really done that for me.
Absolutely. That was the reason why I got a cleaner. Because I remember,
exactly the same.
I was just like, why am I hoovering my own floor? And for the sake of like 20 quid an hour, it's so much better to just have a cleaner. And it's like, it's not to belittle the job. It's just that I don't choose to do those things. And cleaning my windows of my house need to be cleaned. I'm not going to do that. And again, it's not beneath me. It's just I've chosen a different path. And some people like that because they like to kind of polish their world and things. But, you know, I'm never going to hoover my car. No. Never going to do it. And just, you know, I'll pay someone to do it instead because it's much more effective use of my time. You're completely right.
It's funny. The first thing I done was got a cleaner.
There you are. Yeah. If anyone doesn't have a cleaner, seriously, even if it's a small place you live in, just get a cleaner. Because also it gives you that when you walk in the door and it's like, look at this place. That I could never tidy it like this. You know? Cleaners just take it to another level, and it makes everything seem good. So it's a great tip.
Okay, so we're running a bit short on time. So if it's all right, I'd like to ask sort of 2 more questions before we wrap it up, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
The one I'd really like to ask, because this is what a lot of people are having issues with when I'm talking to them, is when they're starting out with their online companies, whatever they may be, whether it's a product or a service they're selling, they struggle to get initial traction online. So what would be the best way you would advise someone to get the most momentum when building traction online initially in the startup phase?
Well, I think the way you put the question is it's really interesting. The problem is that they're focusing on the wrong thing. Now, this seems maybe counterintuitive, but if you're going to try and sell your product or service and you focus on selling your product and service, the problem is that people don't buy that. They buy the person behind it, right? So even if you're a major corporate, you still need a personality. And so to answer your question, they should be focusing on personal brand, okay? Because if you build a personal brand, then people will buy into you, all right? And there's this survey that was done, and it was proven more than half of the reason why someone buys something is the personality, the rapport, and the interaction with the person themselves that represents the product. And again, for a large corporate, that will be the message or vibe of the company. Coca-Cola, Apple, whoever, I can say those names and you'll feel a different thing about the company personality. You need to focus straight away on building a personal brand, interacting with people as much as is possible. Grant Cardone, as I said earlier, was a great example of that. Here's a guy who's worth loads of money, he's got his own private jet, and he sets aside the time to record himself so we get to know him rather than just adverts about his courses and his books. But more importantly, he's gone as far as get in touch with people. He sent me a message on Snapchat. He actually took out his phone and wrote me a message. Okay. And if you do that for not just most people or not just the people who look like they're going to spend money with you, but for literally everyone across all your platforms, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, I know there's plenty to sift through, there's loads of spam on it, but everyone you possibly can, whoever contacts you, you should be giving something back. And it's not with an agenda, not with a kind of here's my link, here's what I do, are you interested in buying my product? No, show them some value, help them out, answer their questions, and be yourself. That's why I do a Q&A session as well each week, because then people can actually see me, and I was talking about this today actually, the idea of being authentic. If you are live on camera, you can't do it for forever without showing your real self. So you get to a point where it's like, do you know what? I'm just going to be me. And if you can build your personal brand, and people, there will. By the way, this is a side point because people are always worried about building a personal brand and people not liking them. I can guarantee that if you build your own personal brand, there will be people that don't like you. I can guarantee it. Definitely. And many of these people, they will reach out, they will use energy and time, we talked about earlier, to send you a message crafted carefully to try and make you feel bad because they think you're rubbish, right? But on the flip side, although they are the vocal minority, there will be plenty of people that love you because, again, there's an abundance of most of the world is online. So if you build your personal brand, what will happen is people are intelligent, right? Same way as if you find someone at a bar you want to chat up, if you when you get home you check them out on Facebook. It's not hard to find people, and that's what they do with you. And you don't have to do much for someone to then say, and I had one today actually, just send me a message saying, Richard, I've been following your stuff. I'm really interested, and I've found your course, 8-Step Startup. And I hadn't sent the guy a link. I didn't even know him. But the point is that if people like you and warm to you, and because of your personal brand that you've built, what happens is then they research you, they're similar to you, they end up buying you first, and then selling your product is a walk in the park. Yeah. Because I can speak with massive authority on this, because I've done cold calling where I'm calling managing directors of multi-million-pound companies to try and sell a product by ramming it down their throat. Seriously, at the turn of the millennium, right, when I was literally starting. I know you're short on time. This is a great story. I was starting out by selling online marketing in the early 2000s. So I was calling, because my first industry, because this is business to business, my first industry was shipbuilding. So I was calling 65-year-olds in like Finland saying, there's this thing called the internet.
Have you heard
Seriously?
of it?
And they're like, no. It's you can imagine they're like wearing the jumpers with the holes in it. They've got like smell of fish. These guys build boats. They're covered in oil. Like, no, there's directories. That's what we use. And my job was to leverage like $6,000 out of them on a cold call after 20 minutes to get them advertising on a website and offer them marketing. And it's like, this is a great idea. It's ahead of its time. It does work, but you guys don't like it. I didn't have time to build my personal brand, but I know from experience that it's bloody hard to just focus on selling only the product, because even the best products in the world, they won't sell unless the whole process is lubricated by having a great personal brand around it.
That's great advice. That really is. That's great advice. And like, so one of my big gripes, and I actually made a video whilst walking my dog the other day about this, is you can't scroll through Facebook without seeing an ad in every other post.
Yes.
You join these forums and it's all, people come straight on and just smash their website on there and say, check me out. And yeah, I can't stand it, to be fair. So no, I completely agree.
Well, I joined a group just to have a look at it yesterday, and within a moment, the group owner had contacted me to try and sell me something. He had like 6,000 people in this group, and if you look through all the posts, at best there were 2 likes on it, whereas other groups there are hundreds, and it's because there's engagement. And what you need to do is get in touch with people and talk to them rather than just spam your way through life. It just doesn't work. And you know what? Are you going to really look back and be proud of that? I doubt it. No. So think about that too.
I mean, an interesting point I can actually make on that is I've tested so many different ways to set up pages and groups on Facebook just to sort of build around the company that I'm running. And interestingly, that book group I just set up, within a day, nearly 100 people had joined it. And because there was no spam on there, and it was purely there just to offer value to people, people were engaging like mad. I've never seen anything grow as quickly. In 24 hours, there's comment after, and people are writing essay-style comments on this feed. It's brilliant. It was brilliant.
But this is the crazy thing, and this is the whole point, for instance, of 8-Step Startup. The whole point is that being authentic, providing actual substance and actual value rather than talking rubbish and pretending, it should be something that is innate within everyone. The irony is that being yourself is the most easy thing to do because you are inherently you. But whereas people pretend so much to be a certain type of person, and they spam a particular type of post saying they're a certain type of person as well, and it just doesn't get anyone anywhere. And the people that really do the best, they're just being actually very open and being very authentic. And the surprise is there's no secret to being successful in business. It's about hard work and being authentic, and it does go a long way. So that's why your group's probably doing so well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty shocked, to be fair, but it was interesting to see. It really was. Okay, well, we'll finish up with one more question, Richard, and I like to ask this to everybody and the answers are actually quite interesting. It's just finally, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone that is just starting out today, what would it be?
I think I'll kind of go back to a point I made earlier to answer this. 100%. You have got to be consistent in your obsession. So I'm cheekily sticking 2 in there, but you've got to be consistent in your obsession about your business. When you have a spare moment, you're thinking about your business in the same way as you think about your wife or your children. You should be thinking about your business like it's a baby, right? And then you have to constantly be thinking, is it going to be all right if I do this? You can't leave it alone for long. If I leave my baby alone for long, there's trouble. And it's exactly the same. You've got to be consistent in that you are always thinking about it. Sundays, Saturdays, whatever, you're always thinking, where can I take it to the next level? Because if you're always consistently thinking about and working on your business, it will, little by little, it will get there. But you can't do it part-time. And I mean 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's part-time.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
For a startup business entrepreneur, you've got to obsess about it in the same way as you should obsess about your family as well. It should be running through your veins all the time. And if it's not, you are doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. I love that. Okay, Richard, well, we'll leave that here. Before we wrap it up, just if you could let us know, how can people find you and get in contact with you online?
Yeah, sure. I think the best way is Facebook. So if you go to facebook.com/Richard Moore, that's MOORE, so richardmoore.official. That's my profile. And also my website is actually going to be a new website launched a couple of weeks. The website is EightStepStartUp.com. And from there's all the other channels, YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and so on. But it's 8-Step Startup. That's EIGHT, not the number.
Perfect. Well, Richard, this is it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. So much good content to come from that. So I really appreciate you coming on and speaking to us today.
Absolute pleasure, Tam. Thanks so much and good luck with it all.
Thank you. Cheers, Richard. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Wow. Okay. So that was an amazing episode, guys. I mean, I got so much just from interviewing Richard. So I'm hoping, well, there's no hoping about it, I'm sure there's at least one thing in there you could take away and apply to your own startup, and it will help you out. So again, thank you so much, Richard, for appearing on our show. Guys, if you do have any issues with your business or you're facing challenges with your startup, then I would definitely recommend going and seeing what Richard is all about at the 8-Step Startup, okay? Or get Richard on Facebook at Richard Moore on his official page. So remember, that's richardmoore.official. But the links for those pages will be below in the show notes, guys, if you want to check them out. Also, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe to the MyCoda channel. You can also subscribe to MyCoda by clicking a link below in the show notes. If you're listening through iTunes, guys, then just visit mycoda.net. Okay, that's mycoda.net. Subscribe to our newsletter, guys, and you'll be notified of upcoming interviews, all the latest content we're putting out, which is free, by the way, and it's great content. It's helping loads of people out at the minute. And also, guys, if you want to ask if you want any questions answered, then just hit us up on Facebook, okay? So go to the MyCoda Facebook page. So that's Facebook.com/MyCoda, MYCODA. And just get in touch with us, guys, and just say that I'm having this issue. I'd really appreciate if you could ask this when you're interviewing your next guest. And if you're on our mailing list, guys, we'll be releasing to you privately who our guests are before anyone else knows, okay? So you can then have a chance to find out, see who they are, see how they can help you, and then pump some questions to us via that Facebook page. So I'm going to leave it here, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for today. It means a lot that you've spent your time with us today. Keep on keeping on, people. Keep taking action. Keep working towards that startup, and I'll see you for that next episode.